Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, January 6th. So, I'm thinking at this point we may start to see some actual video game news start to happen. Although it is a Friday, so it could be pretty slow still. They have a new selection pack out. So we'll look at that, but honestly I don't think I have enough crystals to barely have enough that if I absolutely needed to open the selection pack, I could do that. Maintenance notice and things like that. None of that really seems to ever change for so many maintenance notices we've gotten and issue notices we've gotten. There's just way too many notifications that really don't need to be shown to the main people. And it would be much better if the important things are highlighted. So there's this correction to card rarity. Yeah, that's probably something legally they'd want to pop up and make sure everybody sees it. And then new rank seasons they can do with much fancier animations, and then they could just say click here for more information instead of really building a software that feels much more like it's more of a business class type of software where you're trying to read all the emails and get to zero inbox for some reason. Most players just won't read any of that and just don't care. So the fact that it pops up, the fact that there's not an option to turn that off is really weird. There is probably a cultural aspect to that too, in that the Japanese are more than likely more used to reading in general. So Konami being a Japanese company, they may just think that this is acceptable worldwide. So this selection pack is about to go. We already have a decent amount of that, so no worries in losing that one. And then this selection pack has 24 more days. And yeah, I could see maybe opening some more cards around that if I had extra gems. And then this selection pack, I don't have much of anything for, so I could definitely see opening that, but I'm just so short on gems in general. Perhaps that's because I spent too much on secret packs. Perhaps that's just because of randomness, and we're about to get a new selection pack. There is real danger here now that they've potentially introduced the idea that there will always be 3 selection packs at the same time. We will have an imbalance, whereas up until this point the balance has felt pretty decent as far as the amount of gems you can earn doing daily quests compared to the amount of gems that you would really feel the need to spend with selection packs or normal packs or whatever. There's still really no reason to buy master packs. Let's hop into the rank play. We're at gold. We'd like to get to platinum, but also, unless I'm gonna switch over to my Flowandries deck, which takes longer than even the Zodiac deck, I imagine I'm not going to make it to platinum before they introduce some other festival or thing that I'll have to start focusing on. For the accountability section, it has been rough, but I've done, I think, a fairly decent, maybe 4 to 6 hour episodes of No More Heroes. No More Heroes, my memory of that game and my kind of love for it is way better than the actual game is. My nostalgia had me forget just how terribly designed No More Heroes really is. If anything, Lollipop Chainsaw having some of the ideas or designs of Suda 51, which I think is the case, I think they really helped themselves by not having Suda 51 being the actual director, because I honestly just don't get the feeling from No More Heroes 1 that he is a good director, because there's the fact that there's like 100 t-shirts that actively let you screw yourself over by spending ridiculous amounts of money to buy all these t-shirts, which then makes you go grind out and do the same open world missions multiple times. I had to do the same mission 4 or 5 times and run around and do some other missions just to get the massive entry fees to move the main story forward. Obviously, if you could mod No More Heroes 1, where you just had infinite money and you skipped all the open world and all the side jobs completely, you would have a much tighter experience as far as just going through the bosses. You would probably have to also mod in upgrades so that you could support that. I also would heavily suggest, even if you have played No More Heroes before, play it on the easy mode. I'm almost 100% certain that there is a New Game Plus mode, and beating it once and getting all the upgrades that then would help you potentially in a New Game Plus mode is the way to go, because playing it on normal mode is a nightmare. And even if you got rid of all the open world stuff and all the side jobs and all the other kind of gigs like that, you still will run into a major problem around the minions that you have to fight before you get to the boss enemies. I'm almost certainly not going to come out and say I hate No More Heroes by the time I'm done with it, but there is, when you get to like rank 6 or rank 5 or rank 4, right around the middle of the game, there's a point where they just kind of give up, and you're running down linear hallways, like you're running down the subway from one subway car to the next subway car to the next subway car. You literally get to a point where you're running down a you're running down a hallway for the entirety of the mission, and then in that point, after you run down the hallway, you don't even actually fight the boss. So there's just a ridiculous fake out there, and you basically promise 10 fights, and maybe you'll get 10 fights in the game, but 10 fights at the most. And when you're fighting the minions to get to the boss battles, it's not like you're learning a lot, or like new strategies or skills, or being challenged by doing something different in fighting the minions. You're mostly just warming up your fingers, button mashing. I would also heavily consider suggesting playing No More Heroes 1 on the Nintendo Switch, where you might have those Wii-like movements, which would make the game easier compared to playing it on PC or any other console that it might be backward compatible with the like Xbox 360 or PS3 versions of the game. It may very well be a case that the best way to play No More Heroes is to literally play it on the Wii still, because yeah, when you're using the Wiimote, the movements are super easy, I would bet, and there's considerably fewer buttons for them to put random button prompts on. It was totally a game designed only for the Wii, and it was a game that definitely succeeded on the Wii because there really wasn't another sword swinging game that succeeded on the Wii. There was an attempt at a sword swinging game, but it failed pretty miserably. So, No More Heroes was one of the few adult games on the Wii, and it was one of the few games where you had like a one-to-one comparison to sword swinging. So, it had a lot of success just by standing out and being in kind of a huge gamble. It is interesting comparing the craziness and the violence and the political intrigue that was in Killer 7, a game I've never played before and yet was somehow a niche fan favorite. For the time, I guess I can see why it would have been a niche favorite, but it definitely isn't a game that at this level I would suggest people actually play. But yeah, there's No More Heroes is definitely more toned down in a lot of ways, and evolved to be kind of more commercially appealing. No More Heroes has a lot more violence in it than Killer 7, a lot more gore and blood at least. But yeah, there's just more violence. There's a lot of stupid dialogue that means nothing, and you know it kind of means nothing in No More Heroes, where the stupid dialogue that meant nothing in Killer 7 was pretending like it was this big conspiracy theory story that was going to make sense at the end, and it totally didn't in Killer 7. The main femme fatale lady character is definitely more of an active participant in what I would say is a more healthy kind of sexual flirtation with the main male protagonist, whereas in Killer 7 you just have this weird Samantha character that's abusing and like both physically and sexually abusing a man in a wheelchair, and that was just really, really extreme in Killer 7 for no reason. It didn't really pay off as anything. Yeah, unless there's just a ton of deep lore I didn't understand in Killer 7, which is, it's possible that some of that is better explained somewhere else, but in the actual game I didn't experience any of that. In fact, No More Heroes has like a California, I'm thinking the city Santa Destroy, which I'd always pronounced as Santa Destroya in No More Heroes, but I guess I misheard it. That, like, there's early on you fight an enemy called Shinobi that is this like high school girl assassin that's carrying a samurai sword, and so it is kind of like, here's what an American in an American private school outfit would, with a samurai sword character. You'd think that would be looted upon, and that would be a big thing that they would try to promote and have Travis Touchdown be interested in it, and Travis Touchdown just has no interest in her at all. He is only interested in the femme fatale character, who is older. So there's kind of a large amount of restraint there. The camera looks at her as a tragic character, and the story writes her as a tragic character. Yep. There is also a kind of shocking equal opportunity in No More Heroes, as far as there are both male and female assassins, and Travis Touchdown seems to be willing to fight and, if not kill, Like, so far he hasn't actually killed any of the female characters that he's fought, but he has been willing to totally maim and fight them, and even that much is kind of refreshing compared to most video games where you'll have a token female character that is got plot armor all around them, and there's no chance that anything at all would happen to those characters. Alright, well, that didn't work. Is there anything else, though, to really say about No More Heroes? No, not really. It's just so crazy that it takes too long. It is getting faster, definitely. I'm able to do an entire boss battle and like main storyline section and the open world stuff in about 2 hours, and I'm making these super long 2-hour episodes because, let's face it, No More Heroes is kind of this niche game that really shouldn't take up the one time slot on my pre-recorded footage time slots that I'm doing now, since I'm not comparing this or contrasting that footage with anything else. So yeah, getting it done. But yeah, the thing that just really I have to overemphasize is that they're way too willing to let you screw yourself over and waste all your money and make you grind as punishment for that over and over again every time you get in the open world. And then some of the free fight missions and some of the missions in general just seem like they are completely unfair, because the free fight missions in particular say you cannot take a single hit of damage, and there's really not a system at the point I'm at that would help you actively have a strategy against taking damage, at least one hit of damage, because what happens is they'll either spawn in a random character that will randomly take a swing from off sides of the screen, so you'll be facing 2 or 3 enemies in front of you, and then somebody behind you or to the side of you will take a swing and hit you. And there's not really a system that I see in the game to avoid that. Like, maybe you're just supposed to dodge like crazy, but dodging like crazy doesn't really help either. There is a dodge, if you time it perfectly right, that will get you a slow down time attack, and maybe that is what you're supposed to be doing, but I'm not doing it very well, to say the least. So I don't find that particularly helpful. Let's see. If we do this, and then we do this, and then we say select this, put that up there just to make some space. Let's do this one next. Let's activate this effect, and I guess you toss this one, and I guess at this point you could do that and attach a new card to this guy. That doesn't increase its attack any, but it does give you another card that you could use. And we'll change that back to defense position, and then we'll attack here to a direct attack on this. This is definitely something different that tend not to be able to really pull off. Let's see, at this point I don't think you would have a secondary Zeus that you could pull up. We could do this and this if we wanted to, but I don't know if there's really any reason to do that, so we'll just end the turn. Yeah. Otherwise, for the accountability section, I really haven't done much, but I don't feel too bad about that. I feel like I actually did get a decent amount of progress done yesterday. I also finally got around to through the Adult Swim app, watched the season finale of Rick and Morty, which I'm not sure I particularly love the implications of Rick and Morty Series 7, but whatever. Like, they're gonna do whatever they're gonna do. It's gonna be fine. I just hope that they, and Series 7 maybe is moving towards that direction where they are actually trying to wrap it up and have an actual ending, compared to, say, like the Venture Brothers that just kept on going and getting episodes in slower and slower amounts of time, where it's years and years of Venture Brothers episodes came out until it finally was just officially canceled with no real ending. There definitely needs to be people need to rethink the idea of shows that go on way too long. There probably needs to be a real cutoff that if a show has been out going for a decade, you should probably stop watching it at that point. I know people won't really want to do that, and you potentially are just ever increasingly committed to a series, unless you just wait until a show completely finishes before you even start to watch it, which is really the right way to do things. And there's a lot of good TV content, movie content out there like that, where it's all been released and nothing's perfect, but at the very least you will get an ending. But yeah, very rarely are we getting like the Babylon 5 type release where J. Michael Straczynski at least pretends like he always intended it for it to be 5 seasons and 5 seasons only. In reality, that really wasn't what he planned on or hoped for, because he wouldn't have then made so many movies and Crusade after the fact. Right. So the right move on this would be to summon this. Summon the 3000. Then you would want to summon this way. Chain no more cards. The real move, I suppose, would be to I guess summon something that could do something here. So we can win at this point. Part of my complaint about Rick and Morty definitely would also fall under they're doing fairly consistently now let's go ahead and attack after this because there's no point in just activating effects unless we're just supposed to activate spells. Like they're effectively doing a Thanksgiving episode and a Christmas episode in this season, and that seems like too much when you're really only making 6 or 7 episodes for the entire season. And season 6 in particular does feel like it fairly heavily relied on random episodes that don't really connect. I wouldn't be surprised if season 6 is them wrapping up random episodes for a season 7 that is almost every episode being connected. Is there anything else to talk about? No. I'm really not saying anything, and we should just jump into video game news. One thing I am noticing certainly on Twitter is there is less and less actual video game news coming out, that I am just seeing more and more non-video game tweets as it were. And it might very well be a case that a lot of video game websites have just given up on Twitter permanently, and they're gonna slowly sneak back onto the service. It's gonna be very weird though, because there is definitely a lesson to be learned, and it's a lesson that even applies to me, in that my default description of videos, which would be close to impossible to fix since I have so many videos, has a link to Twitter in the description. A lot of banner art has the little Twitter icon in it. A lot of people built their public contact information around the Twitter logo and the @ whatever address that you owned, to potentially have to redo all of your art and strip that out as you no longer want to be associated with Twitter, or you no longer use Twitter. That is going to be a lot of new art, a lot of visual refreshes, and I wouldn't be surprised if very few people actually do bother to strip it out. And even if Twitter shut down today, I wouldn't be surprised if you see people with the Twitter logo in their own art and on their own videos for a very long time going forward. There's an interesting question about whether I should ever play this card, because you always need that extra space for the trap card, not this trap card, but a different trap card. So it may always be the case that I should do this instead, just to take up less space. But there are definitely strategic reasons why you would want to just have 2 cards out on the field. We're focusing in really hard on actually playing today, which shows in that we are actually winning, but also hurts in that I'm not actually getting to the news anytime soon. Usually Fridays are pretty slow and short as episodes, but today could be a little bit longer. There we go. And this. And in the turn. Speaking of Twitter, and the weirdness around YouTube Gaming, who never really understood Twitter and never does anything very successful here, they're thanking the completionist, here he is, for showing us the ins and outs of games for the past 11 years. So basically, I guess it's just his anniversary. There is definitely a feeling that if you're getting a thank you from YouTube Gaming, maybe that would be that he announced he was going to stop doing his YouTube channel. But I don't believe that's the case at all. There's a link here that I imagine just takes you to his YouTube channel. So yeah, that seems fairly random, and if YouTube Gaming was more consistent around those kinds of fairly random announcements, then that would make sense. But yeah, if we just look at the tweet before that on January 5th, which, yeah, 23 hours ago, January 5th, it is just a video of some Minecraft YouTuber around that. And then after this, this tweet again is almost like it just trying to drive engagement. And are they getting engagement? A little, I'd suppose. 12 retweets, 32 comments, though, is definitely not a lot. I guess this is probably the number of views. I don't even know what that number is. And then 231 hearts. Yeah, for a Twitter account that almost certainly is followed by a ridiculous amount of bots, though, you would assume that there would be much higher engagement than that. Yeah. And it's not just YouTube Gaming, although YouTube Gaming is particularly bad about succeeding or being successful on Twitter. I'm one to talk, certainly. I don't know if I've ever gotten any kind of engagement on any of my Twitter posts. I don't even bother to check it because I'm so uninterested. But yeah, there is definitely a question as to what is the right way to use this service or to get engagement with this service. Alright. I think that's good enough. There. Let's go ahead and activate this too. Just get rid of the blue eyes. Probably not the best choice of cards to get rid of, but whatever. Libretto, however, actually gives useful information. There are several new exciting features coming up for the next RetroArch stable version. Shader linkers, or I think that's supposed to be linkers. No, that's tinkerers. Shader tinkerers and Mac users especially should be in for a treat. And this was 13 hours ago, and it seems like, yeah, still kind of the same low level of engagement. Is Twitter dead because only 8 people commented on your tweet? Even if you're a giant thing? Not really. The truth is, a lot of numbers have always been very, very overblown. And if you were in a room talking about something and you got 8 people to listen to you, comment on it, or heart it, and so I give you a thumbs up or repeat what you said, that would be a massive success. Even if you're doing like the college circuit lecturers and you have potentially 1,000 people in a giant lecture hall and you're giving a big speech, you probably still are going to get numbers into the low single digits, high single digits at that case, because most people just don't listen to people, don't repeat what people have to say. They just don't think in general. Even students, even academics. You can also like compare what was being said in even a megachurch. Let's say you had a megachurch and a preacher is preaching some new concept or idea to 1,000 people. I wouldn't be surprised if you're in the high single digits as far as the number of people that go home after that sermon and have anything to say whatsoever around it, or would comment on it or repeat on it. Truth is, most human beings are 100% around, or almost 100% around output, and approaching 0% as far as input, as far as ideas and thoughts. And I'm no exception, I'm sure. Like, I ramble on in these live streams and talk about the same thing over and over again, and in my own comments you have like one person that bothers to jump into the chat and say something and interact, and then there usually is at least 2 or 3 people that don't have anything to say, and that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just the way of the world. I have an entire personal Facebook page that is literally just in existence because I am using it like a journal and just considering it like a private journal, even though I'm putting the posts public to friends and family, whatever that level of privacy is. Just because I know most people are not going to see it and not going to care because of the Facebook algorithm. Let's try this one. I guess I can't do anything else, so we'll leave it at that. ScumVM is now in its beta, ready to... they have announced support for Halls of the Dead Fairy Tale Adventure 2, a marvelous work by Google Summer of Code 2021 student Yuri Gomeris, aka A-YYG, who ported the original Saga 2 engine from 1997 by the Dreamers Guild. So, yeah. This is, if I'm understanding this right, a new game that's being supported, and maybe a new game in general, from a student programmer who also worked on this. So obviously there's a little bit of benefit by joining the student summer code projects with ScumVM, in that you'll be able to rub elbows and get your own game supported. Although almost certainly you probably programmed his new game to run. I have to assume Fairy Tale Adventure 2 is a new game. I've never heard of it otherwise, and I feel like I would have heard of it if there was something there, if it was an older game. But there is definitely a case where the games that ScumVM is now working to support are so obscure and rare that I very likely wouldn't have heard of them. Activate that effect. Also activate this effect. Discard that card. Destroy this. And destroy this. Yeah, it doesn't seem like I'm gonna win there. Alright. Oh, shoot. Well, I didn't run my macro. I didn't even think about it. Okay, well, then what I guess I have to do here is run the macro now. And if I run the macro now, I wouldn't be able to click on anything. So this does give me an interesting opportunity to show off the macro as it runs. I don't think that would expose anything too private, really, to do it that way. Of course, the macro has to actually run correctly, which in that there's definitely a risk that it wouldn't run correctly. So yeah, let's end this game, which I'm almost certainly going to lose, and then I'll run the macro, and then we'll have the news open, and I'll just show the macro running in itself. Although what will be shown is really not much of anything. Like, I guess if you recorded everything perfectly, you could possibly make a massive amount of progress to copying what I have done to do the same thing I do, and possibly springboard from that and add variations, modifications to it. But yeah, it's not like it's the best code or it's genius code anyways. It is actually, in my own criticism, limited code on a limited user interface that is good enough for what I'm doing, but no better than good enough. Is this trying to make me run out of cards? Guess I could have attacked this guy instead. Probably should have. He is out of cards here, so if I could clear the board, I could win. And I can pull a switcheroo, certainly. Now, if I played this, I would just be totally out of cards. So, let's not do that. This one. Let's activate this one. Toss that. Yeah, I overactivated on that one, but I think we'll be able to adjust here and maybe get back in a better position. Man, this is slow as all get out. That didn't work. If I activate this effect, oh darn it. Well, I am somewhat screwed there, but maybe not completely screwed. If we can get Zeus on the field, which maybe we can do that. Yes, we can. Come on, Zeus. Save the day. And in the turn. So he plays a card. If he plays these two cards, like face down or whatever, and I can clear the field, he would have nothing. But I think it's probably better just to activate this now. And I suppose it would have been better to detach the standard effect monsters over the link summon monsters. Let's see. Just cancel that again. I mean, technically I still have an advantage, but I have 8 cards to do that advantage with. So I'd have to get incredibly lucky here. Now I have 7 cards left. Since we know we don't have Zeus to summon, we can do this first. And then do this. we can detach this and attach this to build up its attack by a tiny amount. Odds are very high I'm gonna just run out of cards. And there's nothing we can do because we can't summon Zeus. Yeah, particularly with showing the macro won't actually do too much anyways, because it's going to require that you also have specific plugins in Firefox now that I'm running in Firefox, installed for it to work. So it really is a hodgepodge of, you have to have the right kind of browser plugins to make it do what it's supposed to do, on top of the macro doing most of the work, doing, I would say, at least 85% of the work. Otherwise it won't open new tabs automatically. And you would end up with maybe one to three pages instead of potentially hundreds of pages. There's literally nothing to be done here. Like, put this face down. If I activate this here and got rid of something, I can't do anything other than reattach that again. Meanwhile, I think this guy is going to just refill his health by 1,000. Really doesn't have to move at all. I would just have to get super lucky. And that seems like what this whole deck is built around anyways, is the general idea of just stalling and making the character making your opponent run out of cards, which that is just far too slow of a strategy for me to ever really want to play. There is potentially a way around this if we get the exact right cards, but we would have to act very fast even around that. Unless there was something special around this card that would destroy it if it was attacked in face-up defense position, no matter what. But I don't think we would be that lucky. So he did move towards a different action, which potentially I could have canceled that action with Ash Blossom instead. If I had it in my hand. There we go. This might work. Let's activate this first and see if they try and cancel that effect as we destroy these two trap cards. 3 turns. Nope, I've lost. There's no way around this. Yeah, I won't be able to get to the battle point. Maybe I have a daily quest that says I should activate a trap card, so we'll play along with this, but this has been a really slow loss, which so many of these losses really are far too slow. And I guess it will make sense for me to do like a running commentary on the way that what the macro is doing as much as I can, since most of it's not even going to be visible. The weird thing certainly is that you need, for guaranteed success, you need the UI vision extension to be up in front of what's actually happening in the background. So yeah, visually it's not even that interesting. Right, the odds of it failing go up significantly if it's not in the foreground. I definitely feel pretty low energy today. The good news is I'm coughing a little less, sneezing a little less, and I do think that has helped my back spasm a little less. Just a little less, so hopefully this most recent episode of back pain goes away. Alright, so let's just show this. So you have a UI vision window here that's in the foreground, and there's just a little bit of a sidebar of the background of the Firefox. So I have this folder in UI Vision called News. This is the macro I'm going to run. The YouTube version 3.1 is how I schedule videos, which I definitely need to do some of that this weekend. I say that every weekend. And then Steam Shorts here is my most recent macro I've programmed. And some of these others are experiments that I abandoned. The actual commands here for run all is to do a little bit of setup. It's just 18 commands, but a lot of them are to run other sets of commands. So I've broken doing Steam down to the Steam follow list versus games that came out on Steam. That's why there's a Steam version 2, Steam version 3, GameDeveloper.com, Gematsu, and Video Games Chronicles. And so the way this works is kind of backwards for the order that we look at it. It does the Steam follow list at the first, which makes it those the last tabs that we deal with. Then GameDeveloper.com, just so there's kind of a visual break between follow list games and games that came out on Steam, and then the news from Gematsu, and then Video Games Chronicles. So yeah, there's a log and variables and screenshots. I don't use screenshots. Everything is saved in comma separated value files. All of that is down here. The UI Vision interface in particular is kind of a mess because it really does not show a lot of code, and the type of code you're going to use is split between these pull down boxes, and then variables potentially either being in the target or the value, depending on what the actual command is. This X type has a special license to it, so you can only do it a certain number of times for free. So, but fortunately for my macro, it only does it twice in total. So yeah, I hit play here, and that first X type activates a shortcut key to, yeah, this is just going to be much more interesting if I just minimize this. It activates a shortcut key to the, my hands are off the mouse at this point, to activate toggling new tabs opening when you click on something. So now it's going down my follow list and taking a link that is saved from the last time it ran, trying to find that link, and then opening 5 follow list games. Now it is at gamedeveloper.com, and it's taking, or it's at least supposed to take, a link that we last saw and opening everything above that. Now it's looking at all the games that came out on Steam and opening everything there that is again reaching the link to the last game that we clicked on Steam. It was actually a lot more difficult to program this one than the others, just to eliminate games that don't have release dates. It's actively checking to see if there is a release date in the column to the right of what it's actually clicking before it clicks on it. And you can see there's this U icon above the links as it's automatically clicking on there. And the page it opens here specifically eliminates Chinese only languages, but it includes everything else. Suffice it to say, without automating this, it would be a massive amount of extra work every time I wanted to do this, every Monday and Wednesday. Now it's doing the Gematsu articles. These are specific, just like here are the news stories on each of these websites in order. And because I programmed the macro this way, you have no reliance anymore on Twitter. The first version of this definitely was going through what's on Steam on Twitter and going through just like people's specific Twitter feed to figure out what new articles were coming out, whereas now this goes directly to those websites. So if a specific website changed their website, I could adjust that quickly. If a specific website went out of business, I could eliminate that very easily. It would just be a toggle button to disable it. There is extra programming here in these pages, in that it knows that there's only going to be about 10 articles per page, and then you have to click next. So it is definitely doing that also, although I guess there is a possibility that it might be clicking next early, or might not. Like, I'm trusting my programming, and maybe I shouldn't. Now it's doing basically the same thing, and what you can see visually is that Gematsu and Video Games Chronicles websites look almost exactly the same. They have different visual aesthetics and visual theming, but they, in their code, are almost exactly the same. That almost certainly is because they're using the exact same software as a blogging software that most of the internet is using, with just different custom themes on top of it. Which, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Why would you custom make a website when you're just blogging or reblogging, in a lot of cases, other people's articles? There is some special code in this specifically for these websites to skip the first one on Video Games Chronicles as a check, because the first one often is a bookmarked advertisement that is being hidden as an article. So yeah, that's a macro. Pretty much done. Uh, it is still technically running at this point, I think, but I think it is pretty much done. Well, actually, come to think of it, I think like the toggle to click on new tabs is supposed to be stopped. Yeah, the macro isn't running, and this X type control shift L is the exact same thing here, and yet this command here did not turn off the click the plus button to open new tabs, and I'm not sure it ever has. So what's probably happening is there's a toggle shortcut key to enable the extra extension, the extra plugin on Firefox, but it only enables, it doesn't disable. So yeah, and in that case I showed the effects, not the code really, which that is definitely, I'm sure, more interesting to people than to actually show the code. Now what's amazing about that, we're pretty much done with the daily stuff though, is that UI Vision really does show that if you are willing to spend 3 or 4 times the amount of energy and effort to automate something than it would take to just get the work done in the first place, you can save yourself a massive amount of time later on. So in some scenarios, if you were working at a job and they said fill in all of this information into our website and submit it, for some reason we have all of this in like an Excel sheet in it, and we want to move it into our website database, and we don't have a better way of importing it, which would be insane, but certainly a lot of companies do crazy stuff like that. That would probably not be a project worth doing if you're only going to do it once to automate it. But if your job is that every day you're going to get, say, emails of information, and that email needs to go and be submitted to a website, there is very possibly a reason to make a macro that would open up your email Gmail client in one browser and then scan that text, put it into values into the UI Vision macro, and then open up another page and submit that text and speed things up. These are much closer to macros than actual programs though. They do have some logic to them, but it is not good programming by any means. You're not going to create something that feels like it's an artificial intelligence or anything close to that, that's making decisions based on the information inside the variables. When you need to do any level of like real coding, you have to jump down to JavaScript, and JavaScript in itself is not a language you really want to be programming in. So yeah, UI Vision great for websites, terrible for anything else. At a certain level, if you were doing a lot of this work, it would almost certainly make more sense to use Python and then directly get information from the internet using Python and maybe curl CURL to download information and post information. Make a program that pretends like it's a browser instead of using a program to manipulate a browser. But that would take a lot more programming and even more time to build. So the advantages are only in speed, and you only need speed if you're doing a lot of work. Alright, let's start going through the video game news now. Naughty Dog has shared new concept art for this Last of Us multiplayer game. We had already talked about this. As a multiplayer game, does this concept art even make sense? Just think about it for a second, because Last of Us up to this point, as I understand it, having not actually played the game, was a stealth game where you were kind of in small enclosed areas fighting clickers all over the place. If you're going to make a multiplayer game of any sort, you have to have bigger areas. Clickers can be around, certainly, but it is definitely going to be a different experience if you have 4 people on a team running around fighting clickers instead of just one person. Even a two-player co-op potentially changes the experience a little bit when you have 2 people directly controlling those 2 characters. I think in Last of Us you had one player that would sometimes tell the other character to do things. A giant cruise liner as a multiplayer game, I guess, is a decent environment, but it will feel very different if you had 100 people running around here shooting clickers left and right, killing them, or clickers are just not even part of the multiplayer. It would be a very different experience. Like, this concept art is showing 2 people only. It's a very different experience if there was 20, 30 people running around, people doing silly things, jumping off of the roofs of things, and or people hiding in the shadows behind everything, and you're just getting sniped all over the place. Yeah, there really isn't a lot to take from this artwork otherwise. At the end of the day, they're calling the title ambitious, and I'll agree with that it's ambitious, but I also will say ambitious often can be stupid too, and I can't help but think that a Last of Us multiplayer game is a stupid cash grab idea. It's the kind of brain dead idea you get from CEOs of video game companies, not creative people trying to do something different. And it is, I guess, very possible that there will not be any clickers and it will just be set further in the future where it's just humans shooting humans. Even in Last of Us 2, there was a significant decrease in emphasis around the clickers and what the game was actually about. Last of Us director says he thinks there's more story to tell. We already talked about that too. At a certain point, you gotta be careful, I guess, of showing like Ellie as a lesbian character and just making lesbians be a thing that you're using to clickbait people more than just showing a character like you normally would show them. Like, how many times in video games would you use a screenshot as Video Games Chronicle, as a news journalist? How many times would you use a screenshot of a straight couple lying dead and lying down in bed staring into each other's eyes? How many times has that even been depicted in video games? I bet the numbers are extremely low if it has ever been depicted. So salacious photo selection can be dangerous, certainly. So yeah, I would potentially admonish Video Games Chronicles around that, but I really don't have a lot of ground to stand on, honestly, because pretty much every Japanese game totally advertises itself around salacious imagery to catch people's attention. We had already heard this too. EA says 60% of the recently wiped Madden franchise saves are likely unrecoverable. Publisher apologizes for a data storage issue which corrupted save files. This almost certainly means that these save files were not even being stored online and that they put out some kind of patch. They say they have backups, so that can't be the issue, really. So then you have to assume that they just had bad backups really, really bad backups. And I bet a bunch of companies really do have that, where they think backups are being made and that they have like a tape drive somewhere that they think is making backups, but they never actually look at the integrity of those tape drives to see if the data actually is there, or it's been broken and just it's been ignored for months and months and months, if not years. Um, there is definitely a case where IT never gets the kind of funding it would like, which is true for most departments in a company, but when you're a video game company and this is going to potentially affect your credibility, um, that's a big mistake to make. Although EA's name is already in the dumpster, so EA making a mistake like this and saving themselves potentially millions of dollars each year by not doing the correct type of backups, they probably consider this acceptable losses. At the end of the day, people who are obsessed with playing Madden will still probably play Madden. Um, there is a significant number of people who only play Madden as far as video games each year, or only play maybe a little bit of Madden, a little bit of Halo. The PlayStation Store's January sale has added 1,000 more games, DLC packs. This also was not new news. They have the first trailer for the Gran Turismo movie. Oh, I'd like to see this, but A, this wouldn't play, and B, if I show it, I'll get content ID'd almost certainly. Almost certainly, too, I guess I'll just describe it. Whatever you would expect from a Gran Turismo movie is probably not going to be much of anything. Yeah, I'm seeing behind the scenes sneak peeks of what is video footage of people driving racing cars, not real world cars. And it is better lit and better shot than what you would see if you were watching an actual like NASCAR racing or Formula One racing experience. As far as that kind of racing, they do have some cars that also look a little bit more like they are real cars instead of racing cars, but not by much. Yeah, so it doesn't really show a lot, just kind of cars and people. And if anything, it kind of just confirms that a Gran Turismo movie is only going to be appealing to people who like some kind of fictionalized version of racing, where there might be a little bit more narrative and a little bit more story and drama around it, but 90% of the movie is just going to be footage of cars going fast. Pretty much, I would say, a year and a half too late, Sony has revealed a PlayStation 5 accessibility controller called Project Leonardo. It is not as boxy, obviously, as the Microsoft accessibility controller, which it's worth pointing out that Microsoft's got a nice advertisement bump by pushing that device while not actually even designing that device. They simply partnered with a organization who had built that accessibility controller. I definitely see what I would suspect are problems around this, particularly in that they are just trying to make things visually look good for that PlayStation aesthetic, when in favor or over focusing on the appearance instead of focusing on the accessibility. Somebody who has trouble moving their hands or limbs is almost certainly not going to be able to have 360 degrees of motion. So, plus you have like this knob. The knob's probably not the worst idea. I wouldn't be surprised if this knob actually unplugs and can be replaced with other accessible accessories. I wouldn't be surprised if each of these are more like ports that you plug things in and out of, and then can have wires going to those things like the Microsoft one. But if this is a power button, I can see people having trouble with this power button. The fact that there seems to be a flap here and a flap here to press these buttons seems weird when there isn't flaps on these other ones. And then the fact that this section is merged together seems weird. See, I guess this would be a point where I'd like to actually hear the audio. Can I do that? Can I get these videos to even play again or play? Let's see. A much bigger picture here. It does seem like there's swappable different types of controllers for one control stick, which would be, I guess, your left stick, not with no right stick. It seems like these bases are swappable and the buttons are swappable, so they're giving you options, but I'm not sure those are good options. Nice. It still does definitely feel like you could need a bunch more of these, or a bunch more of these. Each disabled person is going to be different. The buttons seem to just snap on, and they seem to be programmable, and you do have to also ask the question about how easy to program these things are. Alright. So, this is a 2-minute video, and I'd like to listen to it. Let's see what happens if I click this. Nothing. Because I have to click this. Let's see. Now, you shouldn't be hearing the audio at all, but I am. Part of the problem here is you're going to have people that look pretty bad for camera views, whereas the commercials that Microsoft did, they got really young kids and they advertised it like it was for really young kids, where this is advertising to older disabled people. Yep. It doesn't seem to me like they're talking about the actual ability. This guy very possibly is lying in bed. A lot of these people are green screened out. This guy's eye, I think, doesn't work at all. I wouldn't be surprised if both eyes have trouble. And then you have people like this that I'm not really sure if they're disabled at all. Visually, they don't immediately jump out as being disabled. They definitely could be. Alright, so the thing that's really standing out about this, though, is I'm not seeing anything here that has that plug-in, the 3mm, 3.5mm jack, mono jack connectors that are standard. According to the post, Project Leonardo's is expandable through 4 3.5mm aux ports to support a variety of external switches and third-party accessibility accessories. This enables users to integrate specialty switches, buttons, and analog sticks to the Project Leonardo controller. The external accessories can be dynamically connected or disconnected, which honestly, if you're disabled, you're not going to be dynamically connecting or disconnecting anything. If you disconnect anything, it's going to be an accident and you're going to be upset about it. And each can be configured to act like any other button. This is considerably worse a product compared to the Microsoft Accessibility controller. I wish there was a link here that would point back to the Microsoft one so we could show it off. It has a tripod mount on it, or amps mounts. I don't even know what those are. I assume that's some ambulatory something is what that stands for. And I could see the idea of hey, let's make something that's a lot smaller than the big box that Microsoft has that really would only work on the on sitting it on the ground, but I don't think that's really the right move. Let's see, I'm just gonna type it in. Microsoft Accessibility Controller. See if this gets us to where we want to go. Eventually. I need to learn to not throw my keyboard so far away when I'm doing this too. So here's the Microsoft Accessibility website in comparison, where their push is to promote little kids playing, where PlayStation was really promoting older people. Older people obviously will benefit from this controller as much as anything else. If anything, the giant buttons are very much out of line with the D-pad being still pretty much the same size as far as this controller goes, but one or two giant buttons make some sense. But honestly, the real value of the Microsoft Accessibility Controller is this entire back wall of 3.5mm connectors, which you can connect to. Plus you have a headphone jack. I didn't see anything about that. Plus you have a USB connector to plug in a joystick. Let's see. A lot of these other accessibility things are more programming on this accessibility page. See, I want to focus specifically around this one. So here, the adaptive controller. Yeah. Here you have an adult. Here you can see a back image of what the back side of it looks like. Or here's a better one. So you have, this may be quick settings, I'm not sure, but you have a 3.5mm jack for every single input that you would need, and a wide range that they promoted for anything that you would need. I believe you might even be able to connect something as exotic as a suck blow tube into this device via the USB. Here you can just see a analog stick coming off of that. And in a lot of games, you probably could get away with just one big button or two big buttons to play a lot of them. But yeah, you can see here there's quite the collection of devices. That's like a button that he could hit with his head, although he's in a neck brace, so I'm not sure if he really could tilt his head that much. But yeah. Sure, it's not circular like the PlayStation device, and it's not as accessibly modular in its main thing that you're buying. Yep. Yeah, here is a quad stick controller for quadriplegics. I believe that would be multiple suck blow tubes here, in which you're sucking and blowing with your mouth because that's the only thing that works. Foot switches seems to work with the Logitech 3D Pro joystick. A lot of buttons of different sizes. Yeah. You definitely would have wanted to point out all of the accessibilities the PlayStation 1 offered. Now, arguably, this is still, neither one of them are really customized enough for individual people with individual disabilities. You very likely are going to still want to have something custom made for you if you're going to play a lot of video games, and if you're disabled, you're going to have a lot of free time to play video games. So you might go to somebody like Ben Heck, who has a YouTube channel and a whole side job of making custom controllers specifically for specific people, and modding controllers. But if you were in a rehab facility or a children's hospital, spending $100 to start, really, that's to start, to have one of these devices makes sense. There is also a bleachability question, certainly, around both devices, because if you were going to put this in the hospital, you need to be able to bleach the whole thing for germs and clean it off without short-circuiting it or ruining the devices. Otherwise, you need to buy one of these devices for every single patient you have, and most hospitals are not willing to do that. It is too expensive at $100 to start, but it is also a niche product that not most people are not going to buy. Ideally, it would be kind of nice if this was closer to what you got when you bought an Xbox in the first place, but then you would really be disenfranchising the vast majority of gamers just to accommodate a very small minority of gamers. Like if there was some kind of like drumming game that was a tie-in to this, and you could sell this both as an accessibility controller and as a drumming game peripheral, or like the Rockstar plastic guitars were sold back in the day, you could hopefully bring down the price of these types of devices. And I could see that too. Playing the bongos is what I'm thinking, with two big buttons. And the buttons really aren't that big when you see them in the real world, but standing alone, they definitely look giant. But yeah, it is $100 to start, but then you've got to buy probably 3 or 4 accessories to get it to be playable at all. Like, there's no analog stick on this, where the Sony one comes with some kind of analog stick by default, but there's only one analog stick, not 2, which most games really want 2 analog sticks. You have an AB, but no XY, so you would need 2 accessories for that too. So you are closer to $200 to $300, I'd imagine, at minimal, to use this device. But I would also say the Sony one probably also hitting way more of a high price point than you would think for it to actually be usable. What is dumb about this, though, is that they should have announced this as soon as Microsoft announced its accessibility controller. Or, at the very least, they should have announced this and had a commercial ready for Christmas to tease people. Although maybe since it's not ready for purchase, obviously they didn't want to announce it like it was something that could be purchasable. There's almost an argument to be made that you are getting a lot more buttons here, in the idea that your hand would hover over the center point, and maybe there's even a second analog stick detection, or one big button in the center. Yeah, I guess it is one big button in the center too, because they've got this labeled as a square button, and obviously it's programmable because now over here they have it as a circle button. So one big button in the circle. It's designed to be held this way, which they're making a huge mistake by having a screenshot available that way, because they're just trying to show off the PlayStation logo on this controller. Yeah, I do like the round aspect on second thought. Like, I take it back, I guess. Like, the round aspect of hovering a hand over one big button and then having a whole circle of other buttons that you can press does kind of sound interesting. The merger here now makes a lot more sense, that you would rest your wrist on it and hit R1 and R2 at the same time. Yeah. It is still a mistake to only have 4 connections of extra abilities and seemingly not have any USB connector to add a completely detached second analog stick or first analog stick. But yeah, there definitely is a future where if Microsoft took this design and stole it and made one of these and then attached it via wire to another one of these, or if you could buy 2 of these and attach them via wire, so that you would have one big circle that one hand rested on and one big circle that the other hand rested on, and then you could potentially even have like combos of buttons pressed. That would make a lot of sense. If there was some kind of touch sensitivity or hand sensing on this big button, so it acted like an analog stick if you programmed it that way, that would be interesting also. Yeah. But on second thought, I take it back. I do think the circular design makes more sense. Of course, Microsoft's design with their big buttons, if there were regions of that big button where on the edge, if you put the top edge, that would press the A button and the bottom edge would be the B button. If you could break it out like it was a touchpad, then you would fix that, and then you would get closer to like the Steam touchpads, where you can, I'm fairly certain, program regions in the Steam touchpads to act as buttons. So the Steam Deck also comes down as potentially innovating as far as new input devices, which is kind of the most new innovation we've seen, as people have wasted tons of money trying to invent VR controllers, which you still definitely have a problem of interconnecting current game console controllers with VR controllers with accessibility controllers, when all of those devices really should be merged into one perfect device, if such a perfect device could exist. Well, I'm happy for this announcement a lot more than I was when I first saw it, because I really did feel like Sony was just playing catch up, and they definitely are, but this really got me thinking a lot more the more I thought about it. Of course, the problem now is, if you were to buy something like this, either the Microsoft one or the Sony one, they're not going to play particularly well on PC, and clearly PC Master Race would say you should play everything on PC in the first place. And then if you're playing something on PC, you have almost infinite options as far as what kind of controllers you could plug into a computer. The Steam Deck itself is an interesting thought as far as accessibility. Obviously, it's not going to be for everybody, but it will work for some people, certainly, to have extra touchpads and to have buttons and controllers that you can hold in your hand. A lot of people with disabilities can't hold things in their hands. I wouldn't be surprised if Steam and Valve do try to make some kind of accessibility attachment that is just a USB-C attachment. It wouldn't be a terrible thought. They could say, hey, we're going to get into this market too since we're making hardware now, and see how we do it. It's a better use of their time, frankly, than working on VR, in my opinion. Moving on, Video Games Chronicle says Gran Turismo 7 and Beat Saber are coming to PlayStation VR 2. We're getting definitely announcements of just everything coming to PlayStation VR 2. I would like to potentially get some feedback from disabled people to see if these PlayStation VR 2 controllers aren't just as easy, if not easier, to use than Project Leonardo, though. Because, yeah, again, if you can hold something, if it's light enough, if all the buttons are getting very compacted together, that might work for a lot of disabled people. It may work not that much for some of the other disabled people. Although, like, obviously, if you need a giant button or a giant input, these kinds of controllers with small buttons and small inputs won't work. And I guess generally speaking, if you can hold a controller normally, you don't need an accessibility controller in the first place, and VR controllers are just the equivalent of holding a normal non-VR controller. So it probably is a lot more difficult for people the smaller the buttons are. Sony says the PlayStation 5 has cleared 30 million sales after its biggest month yet, being Christmas. 30 million sales is an interesting number because there was a game we were talking about that had, over its lifetime, sold 30 million copies. And so 30 million obviously is a peak point for both hardware and video games. A game to get 30 million sales obviously has to be on multiple platforms, because it's severely unlikely that every single person who bought a PlayStation 5 would buy the same one game. So 30 million is probably a third of the entirety of the gaming community. So yeah, I would say you could probably guess that there's probably about 100 million gamers out there that have one or two consoles and or play on PC as a console, considering that a console too. So if you make that rough assumption that there's about 100 million gamers out there that are actual hardcore gamers, and you exclude people who are just playing Candy Crush on their cell phone, if you include that, then the number is much higher. Then you can pretty much assume that any game that has sold anywhere near 100 million copies has been incredibly successful, and very possibly something like Resident Evil 4, where the game has been sold multiple times. And it very well may be a case that no individual game has sold anywhere near 100 million copies, but the Resident Evil franchise in total, amongst its many sequels and spin-offs, has sold nearly 100 million. That would be something that would be helpful, certainly for me, is if I had the numbers up to date anytime a new statistic is mentioned, if I made some kind of like note or Excel sheet to compare. And in general, that would be helpful if Video Games Chronicles had those numbers and compared that to something else. But they don't bother to do that. It'd be very useful if they said PlayStation 5 has cleared 30 million sales after its big months yet. In comparison, Xbox Series X and Series S has cleared, well, let's say 20 million sales. I wouldn't be surprised if it's even less than that. Bungie is working on a number of unannounced projects with Sony, according to Video Games Chronicles, which I guess that's good to hear, but they're unannounced projects, so that doesn't really mean anything. World War Z hits the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S this month with exclusive content. The new Horde Mode XL will also be available on PC, so I don't know what is actually exclusive on the console versions of it. Probably just costumes. No More Heroes is kind of a great example of a game that gets ruined by costumes, even though there isn't any microtransactions in it or to buy the costumes. It's just in-game fake currency to buy the costumes and the t-shirts. But even at that, it really ruins the experience. You waste your money on that, and then you can't continue to play the game because you wasted your money on it. It would have been so much better if they just had a custom character creator with everything unlocked at the beginning of the game, if they were going to do that. But also, it would have been much better if they just not made any of the t-shirts at all and just made better level designs, better layouts, better textures in the world. Added some features like open world battles in the open world sections, because you drive around the open world and there's just like nothing to do, nothing happens. The lighting also on the PC version of No More Heroes is pretty bad. There's on top of texture pop in all over the place, and item pop in and pop out all over the place. There are many times when it looks like characters are just in complete darkness or near complete darkness, or the main character is in shadow. UK competition watchdog extends its inquiry period for the Xbox Activision deal, which the CMA's final report will now be published by late April instead of early March, which arguably I guess they're just still fishing for people to say whatever they want to say. At a certain level, it seems incredibly unfair to say we're going to ask for inquiry for a 30-day period, and then for them to try and change the rules and move the goalpost and say actually it's going to be a 60-day period. It sounds a little unfair if you think of it as a game, but it's probably incredibly fair if you're trying to give the public, and in this case you're including competitive businesses like Sony as the public, every opportunity to have their say. It's much like the court system, I would say, where everybody should be allowed to speak in court to a fairly wide extent and have their say in court and have their grievances aired. And that it definitely causes government procedures to be slow, but slow often means safer and better. In the end, all these stories end the same way, in that we assume the merger is going to go through. Bloober Team says it's feeling high pressure to deliver with its Silent Hill 2 remake. The marketing boss tells fans the studio, quote, won't miss the point while living up to the title. Livening up the title. I guess it's, livening up the title. I still feel like it's incredibly weird that you would make a remake of Silent Hill 2 and not do something with Silent Hill 1. In a funny way, this is just the Resident Evil mistake being done over and over again. But in this case, it's even worse because they had relatively recently made a remake of Resident Evil 1, even though it was really more of a remaster than a remake. In the Silent Hills instance, there has not been a remaster or remake of Silent Hill 1 in a very long time, as far as I recall, as far as I know. somebody just needs to make a Silent Hill 1. It doesn't even have to be that good, just something that it'd be nice if it was as good as the Bloober Team Silent Hill 2. But you are going to have this weird case where Silent Hill 2 gets remade, sells well, and then what does Konami do? Make Bloober Team remake Silent Hill 1? Or do you do the more logical thing and have Bloober Team remake Silent Hill 3 and then try to hire some other company to make Silent Hill 1? Yeah, very weird decisions. Like, Konami really should have just not been so cheap and forked out the cash to have Bloober Team make Silent Hill 1 first. I guess, though, if you've got the engine and everything looks good on Silent Hill 2 and it sells well, which it almost certainly will sell well even if it is a bad game, you could potentially do a lot less programming to remake Silent Hill 1. According to Video Games Chronicles, the Nintendo Switch narrowly topped UK's console sales in 2022, while FIFA 23 outsold Modern Warfare 2 to lead to the annual software sales chart. Narrowly is an interesting outcome. The drop was mainly attributed to the PlayStation 5 supply shortages and a decline in Switch sales. So people in the UK saturated with Switch sales, and PS5, had it been available, would have been the main seller. A lot of this definitely comes down to also just how big of a fandom there is around soccer and FIFA. 1 second, I'm gonna readjust myself in my chair. I've been sitting for too long at 2 hours. Yeah. I think my cushions are used to me only sitting for 2 hours. Yeah, I need to move a little faster through this news. Yeah, so the Nintendo outsold the PlayStation 5 and probably wouldn't have if the PlayStation 5 was available. We'll leave it at that. The Epic Game Store's next game has been announced. First Class Trouble will replace Kerbal Space Program and Shadow Tactics AICO's Choice. I've never heard of this game, First Class Trouble. It looks kind of interesting. Yeah, I would definitely say grab Kerbal Space Program now while it's free. It's a game that is traditionally overpriced. Don't probably get hyped for Kerbal Space Program 2, because I have not a great amount of faith that it's going to be a good game, or that it will even be a fad that people would really want to play that much. Moving on, MagFest has been criticized for a public jab at the game website Kotaku. Kotaku is in general not liked by a lot of gamers. The gaming event questioned the publication's journalistic integrity on its signage. Now, I don't know why you would do this publicly. It's a funny meme, certainly, but it is something that is going to get you as many enemies as it gets you fans, because yeah, most gamers are going to go, oh yeah, that's funny, haha, and move on, and it's going to create just a little chuckle. Whereas the outrage mob, which is frankly almost all of Kotaku's fandom, I'm exaggerating there, are going to just use this as the public attack that it is and be outraged. We could go down a long list of Kotaku's journalistic integrity being non-existent. But yeah, as far as like MagFest, I don't even know what MagFest is. Hmm. Hmm. They're saying for clarity, it was intended to poke fun at a one line in an article written about their COVID response last year. It was immediately pulled from the floor, so that they immediately backed down and apologized for it. Hmm. 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 Here we have people calling it a dog whistle, which I don't feel like it. Um, they're referencing Kotaku in action, which was, I think, somewhat like a Gamergate thing that probably does not even exist here. Here they're literally just bringing up the dead corpse of Gamergate to attack once again. Like, I don't think there probably is really any significant number of people who are involved in Kotaku in action or Gamergate. There is nothing in this article particularly pointing out the many bad Kotaku articles and just poorly investigated, poorly written articles that have been done for clickbait reasons by Kotaku. Kotaku by far is one of the worst sources for video game news, and I wouldn't recommend anybody look at it, even if you're just keeping an eye on it. It is probably the closest thing, I guess, to a Fox News as far as video game websites, although it is extremely liberal instead of conservative, like Fox News. But it is definitely also more of the social justice warrior type liberals that are creating controversies and complaining about video games instead of actual useful liberals that are actually trying to accomplish any kind of social change or improvement. I guess it is somewhat questionable whether this is even news or if this isn't just, even in Video Game Chronicles case, feeding drama for drama's sake, and really should have just not been reported on in the first place because it has nothing really to do with video games, and that's the real problem here, is this attacking Kotaku or even mentioning Kotaku in any way has nothing to do with video games in the long run. Like, is there anything else to say around this? Video Games Chronicles being a UK based site, they may have less experience with Kotaku. They may be dealing with Kotaku.uk, which does things potentially different than Kotaku.com does. So they may be coming from a different base of understanding of what Kotaku is. There are definitely a lot of sites out there, like Reset Era also, that on the face of it look like good sources of news for video game information, but have kind of a underbelly of having a different kind of agenda of some sort to promote certain ideas, certain thoughts, or just promote nonsense that are not true at all. Let's see, moving on. A month after its release, Marvel's Midnight Suns is 33% off on all platforms. 2K is offering a big early discount on the Fire Access well-received strategy game. I'm sure they're not doing that out of the kindness of their hearts. I didn't even know Marvel Midnight Suns was released. So they really failed to promote and publish it, and discounting things might promote or publish it some more, but in the end I would heavily suspect that this is a game that will be incredibly cheap if not completely delisted, if there's some kind of online element to it, and shut down in a year. Marvel Midnight Suns never really did explain what kind of game it was before it came out, and even by the time I did know what kind of game it was, I had lost all interest in it. Let's see. PlayStation Plus sales offering heavy discounts for new subscribers and upgrades. Check out this article if you're interested. Since I don't play on PlayStation, I'm not going to bother to read any more than that. CD Projekt is going to settle the Cyberpunk 2077 investor lawsuit for $1.85 million. The suit alleged the company misled investors over the state of the game. That is not a particularly large amount of money. So I think CD Projekt Red got out easy on that one, particularly considering how bad Cyberpunk 2077 came out when it was originally released. It's, I hear, better now, but probably still not good enough. I have also noticed that the Cyberpunk Edge Runners Netflix anime has lost its 15 minutes of fame. They just announced a second season of the Wednesday Addams Family show. They don't have anything new to show there, but it does make a lot of sense that since the actors are kids, you would have had the green light and start shooting a second season fairly quickly, and it did seem to get enough reception there. But yeah, particularly the characters in Cyberpunk Edge Runners, who are getting a lot of lewd fan art. I'm seeing less and less of those characters show up. So the Rule 34 group, which is probably a good indicator of fandom in general, is moving on to something else. And in general, I've just not heard people talking about Cyberpunk Edge Runners as much anymore. Because, yeah, there really isn't that much to say about it once you've seen the whole series and something else new has come around. There is currently a decent number of people upset with the new Witcher Netflix series, but the Witcher Netflix series Blood Origin also is not really connected in any way to the video game, so it's not really video game news. Even the Witcher Netflix series originally wasn't really being based off the video game, so we may see more of that happen, where you have TV shows that are based off of books, and those books potentially were made into video games, but there's going to be a fairly large mental divide where the video game versions are going to be their own thing and the Netflix series are going to be their own thing, and the two are not going to be connected. We saw a lot of that certainly with like Walking Dead video games. Almost none of the Walking Dead video games in any way tried to be connected with the Walking Dead TV series, or really even the Walking Dead comic books. They all tried to do their own thing and were each evaluated as their own thing. Microsoft has launched an Xbox Series X Forza Horizon 5 bundle. It saves users $40 if you bought the two products separately, which that is the kind of sale that is a good sale, only if you were going to buy the product separately. If you weren't going to buy the product separately, then it's a bad sale. NetEase has acquired the Halo and Minecraft co-developer Skybox Labs, and interesting that there was a co-developer for Halo and Minecraft and we didn't know about it, but that's kind of how the entire game industry works, is that there are a lot of third-party developers that are maybe even co-developers or maybe made 90% of a game, but they don't get the credit for being the company that made the game. So this Canadian studio has just been acquired by a Chinese tech giant. NetEase somehow managing to get less bad press than Tencent in their acquisitions. Let's see. Skybox is the latest string of studios acquired by a Chinese tech gaming company in recent years. They also acquired No More Heroes developer Grasshopper Manufacturer, which is, I guess this is an interesting thought as to what games, if any, are going to be made by these companies now that they're acquired by NetEase, and Quantic Dream. So yeah, I'm playing No More Heroes 1 right now. Ideally, a remake of No More Heroes 1, or even a merger of No More Heroes 1, 2, and 3 into one mega game would be really cool. Or just moving forward and guaranteeing a better No More Heroes 4. But yeah, if they do nothing, if they make bad games, that would suck. But the odds were always high that any developer could make bad games. They also acquired Quantic Dream, makers of Heavy Rain, Detroit Become Human, Beyond Two Souls. Those are all very much visual games with very little gameplay, whereas at least No More Heroes and Grasshopper Manufacturer had some action in their games. And there you have some like weird European games and then weird Japanese games, and now they're acquiring the Skybox Labs, which is working on Halo Infinite, which is more of a Western game. Minecraft games, they may have worked on the side Minecraft games and Fallout 76. So these three companies combined may find a nice way to share talent and share skill, if that's really what's going to happen to them. The main fear, though, is that all three of those companies now are going to either make nothing, or they're going to make terrible mobile games or terrible Chinese games, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Monkey King story narrative games, which I don't think that would work well at all. If Grasshopper Manufacturer tried to make just a traditional Chinese game, or Quantic Dream tried to make a traditional Chinese game. Let's see, eBay UK has top pre-order deals on Hogwarts Legacy, Dead Space, and Forspoken. Nintendo Switch OLED models also available for £289 using 15% discount codes. This feels much more like an advertisement than new 15 is the code than an actual announcement. I don't know if I would suggest buying anything via eBay ever, or maybe eBay UK has more protections than eBay, but PayPal and eBay are really questionable sites as far as whether you're going to get the product that it's promised, and whether you could get a refund if you don't get the product that is promised. Now this is Dead Space, not the Callisto Protocol. You have to remind yourself of that. Dead Space hasn't been released yet. None of these games have. You're also giving people money early and getting a 15% discount for that, which is a dangerous gamble, certainly. I did see on Woot, and I generally don't talk about sales, but Woot via slickdeals.net has space heaters that are on sale. Most of them are wall-mounted ones. There's a mix match of them that work with the Tuya smart Wi-Fi connections, so you could control it by your phone and schedule it better. Some of them don't have that feature. Oddly, if you want to get the one with the plastic feet, for instance, then it doesn't have the Wi-Fi connection ability. So weird trade-off there. There is a garage version that has to be hardwired into like a 40 amp 240 circuit, so you need an electrician to do that. But if you have a small house and a garage space heater installed, you could potentially heat your entire house with that if you leave your garage door open, and that one does have Wi-Fi. So interesting sales there, as we are just at the beginning of winter in the United States, although these 2-year devices really are designed more for European standards. They will work in the United States, but they don't have quite the listings that you would want, or you might be required by some rules and regulations. But yeah, that's an interesting sale that's going on. Otherwise, Christmas items I've seen have been going on sale as far as trees and lights, as they're clearing out all of that, which makes some sense. Moving on to the Gamatsu articles, I really need to rush through this. We had already talked about this game, Wayland, Unexpected Guest, launching January 24th. Last of Us series topping 37 million now. Gran Turismo adding PSVR 2 support, we already talked about. Beat Saber coming to PlayStation VR 2, already talking about. It does definitely feel like Sony is all over the place as far as, are they focusing on PlayStation VR 2 this year, or are they going to promote accessibility this year, or are they focusing on having AAA games, or are they focusing on just having more PlayStation 5s to sell? They definitely can't announce a PlayStation like 6. They just can't announce that this year. So they need to focus on one thing, and you'd ideally hope that they'd focus on games instead of accessories. But it does seem like they're more focused on accessories. Here, when you look at this controller compared to the accessibility controller, there's just really no connection there at all. There's 4 buttons here, 2 analog sticks, a touchpad. I think they still have a touchpad there. A D-pad. There's a right bump, left bump, and there usually is an R1, R2, and maybe even R3 in controllers. You have motion controlling and tilt controls in some of these controllers. You have further feedback on vibration in the controllers, and potentially force feedback in the triggers. So there's a lot in a modern console controller that you would have to convert to an accessibility controller, and I don't think any of them have quite done that. I saw something on Facebook, and this is probably just fake news, that said you might damage your PlayStation if it was held vertically, but I would take that as rumor at this point, because they would be reporting on that if anybody had really done any kind of test and found that it being vertical. There would have been more of an argument that you shouldn't put your PlayStation vertical if there was a hard drive in it, but there aren't hard drives, no spinning hard drives in it. So it would just be like a heating issue where all the heat on the heat plate and heat spreader on the CPU might dissipate a little bit better if you have it on the side compared to all the heat going up vertically. That's the only thing that would make any sense, other than the general danger of having your PlayStation fall over and take physical damage, shock damage, which, again, no spinning hard drive, so there isn't a high chance of even it taking damage if it fell over and had a small bump on a carpet. Moving on, Puzzle Bobble 2X and Bust-A-Move 2 Arcade Edition, Puzzle Bobble 3, Bust-A-Move 3S Tribute, launch February 2nd. I assume these are 2 games, in the sense that I bet Puzzle Bobble 2X and Bust-A-Move Arcade Edition is 1 game with 2 games included, and then this is a different game with 2 games included. Yep. Generally, I think most people already know what Puzzle Bobble and Bust-A-Move is, so I will just leave it at that. These are ports of arcade versions as well as 4 console versions. It definitely would make more sense for this to all be 1 product. Metal Black S Tribute launches February. This sub line of S Tribute do feel like these are just ports of old games being resold. The Metal Black S, or Metal Black being a shoot 'em up game. Goblin Slayer, Another Adventurer, Nightmare Feast has been announced for Switch and PC. It's a completely original story, I assume based off of the anime manga called Goblin Slayer, where the main protagonist has a total bloodlust for killing goblins. Maybe a justified bloodlust, but yeah. Violent anime. The smartphone game Is It Wrong to Try to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon? Familia Myth Battle Chronicle has a trailer and a closed beta set for March 16th to the 22nd. I really don't have time to watch the trailer, but let's see, they're showing screenshots of what definitely look like the anime and the actual game is more of a Genshin Impact looking type game. The title, I think, is fairly deceptive around what the actual narrative of this story is. I think the narrative of the story is really the main character is a good guy, and he grows a group of friends to make a good team to defeat monsters in dungeons and become better and stronger. And I guess that is somewhat implied in that he is questioning whether he should be hitting on girls or picking up girls in a dungeon. But it does really imply that there's a lot more just romance focus on the main character than I think actually there is. I've also realized as I'm trying to watch Naruto on Netflix, but I'm bored, that Naruto is kind of a terrible title for that series because they very rarely pay attention to Naruto as a character in the first couple of seasons. I'm in the middle of season 2, and they are much more focused on the other characters and introducing new characters. Let's see. A game called Power Chord launches January 26th for PC and then later on Switch. It is a rock and rogue-like inspired game. I don't even know what rock and rogue-like means. Is there another game called Rock and Rogue, or is this just a roguelike with rock and roll themes? I suspect it's probably a roguelike with rock and roll themes with a card-based battle mechanic, deck building. Visually it does stand out, so there's something here, but there have been a lot of card-based Darkest Dungeon feeling type games, and a lot of these visuals could get very repetitive and boring if the game is too long. This is one of those games where a tight 20 hours might be better than 60 hours, which that then hurts the idea of being a deck builder and wanting to play for more time. This might be a great game to play right after playing something like Brutal Legend to compare different kinds of rock and roll themes. Rock and roll really doesn't play as much of a role in video games as you might think it would. Moving on, a narrative adventure game, Opus Prism Peak, has been announced for PC. You play as a photographer lost in the ethereal realm and unveil its mysteries with your camera to find your way home. So this is like either the second or third camera-based games that has been announced in the past couple of years. There is a unique art style here, certainly, in that it is more of a softer CG looking art style. Does feel kind of like it's somewhat flat 2D, while the models probably are actually 3D. Kind of a flattened 3D. It seems like probably there's a narrative here in which you were in love with this girl, this anime girl, and she like passed away, and you're taking photographs to be memories to let go of her, if I was to guess. So main focus on this one character. I would assume that she's probably Japanese, looking at these rice fields, like a country Japanese girl. Yeah, by the looks of it. And I guess it would be questionable if there's actually a gameplay mechanic around the photography, or whether you just take pictures and any picture you get is good enough and you're not getting like a score around it or anything like that. It might be an incredibly short game that they want you to play multiple times to get better pictures, or it might be a short game where you play once and whatever pictures you get is whatever you get. Moving on, Fire Emblem Engage has an overview trailer and a Japanese commercial if you want to check that out. I'm not that interested since it's a Nintendo game I'm not going to play. Blue Reflection Sun First overview trailer is a PC/smartphone free-to-play game due out in winter in Japan. A spin-off or continuation of the Blue Reflection series, where you have what, if I recall correctly, was a lot of Yuri/lesbian young maiden otome anime girls that get into this alternate universe and are able to like magically transform into creatures that fight in an RPG game. They started off as Japanese girls, but that screenshot clearly is showing them all in kind of monster forms. There's an actual Japanese schoolboy. I've never really gone deep into the Blue Reflection game enough to know how far it goes. It definitely feels like a game that could be lewd and only lewd and just have implied relationships. There may not actually be any actual like romance relationships at all in it, and I may be wrong about this. This may just be a girl game from a Japanese developer for girls with a group of friends of girls. Compared to something like Samurai Maiden, which heavily implied it was going to have a lot of lesbian relationships when it first was advertised, then it was censored. Samurai Maiden was one of the worst games listed by a YouTuber, just in the fact that the game, he actually played it and the game played horribly, and on top of that they had censored it, and so the only audience that potentially would have wanted to play Samurai Maiden was turned off from actually playing it. It's interesting, there is a male character here, because the other Blue Reflection games didn't seem to have any male characters at all, to the point where I was questioning whether it was a universe without male characters. In a lot of ways, this is very similar looking to a lot of other Japanese RPG type games. It's just with the big difference of we're going to have a group of anime girls be the protagonist instead of a male protagonist. That most recent Shin Megami Tensei game probably would have been more interesting to me had they picked, say, this one character to be the main protagonist in that game, instead of having a very weird looking male devil-like character in Shin Megami Tensei. Part of the problem is it's just that character is too devil looking whereas you still have a lot of humanity in these monster characters, and in that they have human faces. They're not covered in ridiculous amounts of different colors. They look like they are humans that were transformed into monsters, whereas the character in Shin Megami Tensei looks barely like a human at all. Moving on, Deathverse Let It Die is going to temporarily suspend service on July 18th as the game is being, quote, redeveloped. We believe that re-releasing the game with significant improvements will allow it to be enjoyed by a wider audience than its, as well as our current players. This is a weird situation because certainly there is the fear that it's going to be suspended on July 18th, and then there will just be delays and delays and delays, and then eventually they'll just say, actually, we're never bringing it back up. I don't know why you would boil the lobster like that, but it probably would cause less controversy. Deathverse Let It Die hasn't been out that long. I think they really do want it to succeed, though. So I think they are going to really try to make it work, but it's hard to really have a lot of faith in any game company. And Deathverse Let It Die is, I think, associated to the other game Let It Die, but maybe it's not. It looks somewhat like that, but it is also a multiplayer player versus player game, so I don't think there's much of an experience you can have in it single player. I don't think you can have any single player experience in it. Genshin Impact version 3.4 update launches January 18th. Here you can see, looks like a Chinese New Year. Some screenshots. Genshin Impact still adding content, and I'm sure making their fandom happy enough. You definitely don't have people still talking about Genshin Impact in general, but also I don't think people that are playing Genshin Impact are being treated poorly. I think they're being treated well enough, at least. Skybox, NetEase acquiring Skybox Labs, we already talked about. Power Wash Simulator for the PS4, PS5, Switch launches on January 30th. This game, I think, is already on Steam. Yeah. Go to check it out. Yeah, it's overwhelmingly positive on Steam. It's being published by Square Enix, of all people. So, yeah, let's go ahead and put that on the wish list while we're checking that out. I could see playing Power Wash Simulator a little bit better than House Flipping Simulator, in that House Flipping Simulator is a little bit of a different experience. If anything, I guess Visceral Cleanup Crew is the better game to compare to Power Wash Simulator, and Visceral Cleanup Crew never had a single player mode that quite felt good enough that you would want to just play it without a group of friends, whereas I suspect you could potentially play this. There is, I guess, a slight question as just how much variety of things that you can power wash that there will be. There might only be 5 hours worth of actual gameplay here, and then it'll come down to whether you would want to do the same levels and power wash the same things over and over again. There is definitely an emphasis here of streamers, and they are trying to make this a streamer game, which does potentially make me think the game is not as good as you would think it is. The game Backfirewall _ launches January 30th for basically everything, it seems. Solve puzzles to save a smartphone's previous operating system from deletion. Okay, well, that sounds interesting. And that's our last Gamatsu article, so now let's just burn through games that came out on Steam very quickly. Since it is Friday, and since I watched the macro open up tabs, almost certainly we will see adult games come out today. This race in the desert doesn't look good enough. Let's see, is this in an adult game? Let's see. Sexual content, posing. Yep, looks like it's censored. We have Nika Rise, not to be confused with the mobile game Nikkei. Seems to be a match 3 game. Duel match 3 game. Really. Only. And doesn't really seem like there's much of a game there otherwise. And then there's screenshots of flat anime characters, most of which seem to have a lot of cleavage and big breasts. I'm not seeing it really any indication of legs or butts being shown. So yeah, that doesn't really strike me as great. But at the very least, it wasn't a slide puzzle game or just a visual novel. This game Fluff looks like you just collect fluff balls, and then you have some pictures in the background that are nice, but that seems to be all there is to it. For $1.99, that is far too expensive. So no to that. The Past looks like an asset flip horror game, so we can say no to that. Bargain Blocks looks like nothing. Dawn of Griseo looks like it's probably a visual novel that doesn't support English. Yep, it's a Japanese only visual novel. What's funny about this is I don't know if I'd even really call this an anime style, even though it is anime angles. The color palette is actually fairly dull. I guess there's not a better descriptor, and that's part of the problem. But yeah, this doesn't really jump out as being very colorful. Let's see. Hex-based strategy board war game. Oh, I think this is far too ugly and far too complicated. This feels like something that would have come out for like Windows 95. Is this an adult game? Yes, this is. Pacsu, P-A-C-C-S-U. It looks like it's an RPG Maker game. And then there's these demon-like cat characters with giant breasts and giant cleavage. Turn-based combat laced with lewd battle scenes, it says. What's funny here is it kind of seems like there's a little bit more polish on Pacsu. Even the name stands out as something that they are really trying to make a game around. It says there are 80 plus scenes. It's $7.19, which is a little expensive. It's English only. The description of what you see is incredibly detailed in the mature content description. Like blowjob, boob job, futa, hot dogging. I'm not even sure. I'm 100% certain what that is. Public humiliation, multiple penetration, tentacles. Like, if all the mature content descriptions were that detailed, it would be nice. It'd be nice if there was just a whole collection of tags that were for adult-only games. It also says all characters in the game are over 18 years and they have passed the Harkness test, which what in the world is the Harkness test? Let's see what this explains. Harkness test, know your meme. So it's a meme. Harkness test refers to a hypothetical set of guidelines in which it would be permissible to have intercourse with a fictional non-human character. The criteria: does the character have human intelligence or greater? Can it talk or otherwise communicate with language? Is it of sexual maturity for its species? The list is named after Jack Harkness, a character from Doctor Who, and Torchwood, who displays attractions to species and humans and non-humans alike in the show. Okay. Well, that's an interesting, mean bit of information. Yeah, Paksu does definitely feel like they're trying harder as far as adult games, and I appreciate that, certainly. It gets real boring when all adult games are just lazy, low effort experiences. Unfortunately, speaking of lazy, low effort experiences, I can't help but think Love and War Hero by Chance 2 is exactly that. This is an English-Chinese game, and it seems like there isn't actually any adult content in it, but there definitely is an emphasis on cleavage. But like most mobile game ports in Chinese games, there's just way too much menus, way too much interface, and not that much actual gameplay. So that's going to be a no. Alien Maze looks like it is yet another adult game. They may all be bundled up. This time it seems like it's a low effort maze game with some lewd background images. And it again feels like it is a Chinese game. It supports English, Chinese, Japanese, simplified Chinese, and traditional Chinese, and it's in early access. Yeah, the actual game seems to be just dragging with a mouse in certain directions to solve a maze, and that seems to be all of it. And then when you're done, you get a screenshot. Escape from School Felix, on the other hand, feels like an asset flip horror game. Honestly, if we could get half of the adult game creators to make horror games and half of the horror game creators to make adult games, there might be a nice merger to just force those companies to do something different and maybe learn to be better. Yeah, the idea of group projects or forced group projects in the video game world is not something that really exists, obviously. You can't, under capitalism, force a company to work with another company, but it would be an interesting experiment. And all the non-adult games are predictably just really boring. League Manager, there's nothing to say here. Here we have another adult game, Shadow's Kiss Online Vampire RPG. This one, I suspect, heavily relies on a character creator, and then you are mostly, I think, just LARPing. It definitely feels like it is attempting to do what the Masquerade game, the old Masquerade game, was it Bloodlines Masquerade or something like that, felt like, with just a little bit more adult content in it. Like, but the visuals here don't look really even better than that old Masquerade game. This looks absolutely awful. It's not even widescreen, and it's really questionable as to what you're actually doing. It seems like you're just walking around environments and maybe dungeon crawling, but I don't know if you're fighting people or if you're just talking to people. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a Second Life, Vampire the Masquerade. Let's see. Yeah, and very little adult content being implied with any of these screenshots at all. Early access, $24.99, English only, and it's an MMO. That does does not spell good things. Apparently, this is a Kickstarter game that has been in the works for 5 years, and they're just releasing it now. Probably releasing it to abandon it, if I was to guess. Yeah, even up at 5 years though, this game is unacceptably ugly. If this had come out 5 years ago, this would have been unacceptable to not have widescreen, to not have better 3D modeling. Inherently, I think a lot of the Vampire the Masquerade fans, or vampire LARPers in general, are so deep into their own thing that they're getting scammed upon by game developers, and it's just too much of a niche product in the first place that I just don't think you would ever succeed in making a vampire game. We will see. There is a Redfall coming out very soon, in a couple of months, and that is a vampire based game, and we'll see what happens there when that comes out. Then we have a game called Lollipop that this must have been an old game. It looks like an old game, and it actually looks like a pretty decent old game as far as a platformer. Yeah, you definitely don't see platformers like this anymore. So I'm going to put this on the fall list. It's being published by Ziggurat, who is known for releasing old games. Not all of them actually worth playing. But yeah, I think Lollipop does deserve to be on the fall list, and I'll make a YouTube short around it. Here we have a cat-based parody of Slender Man, which is a funny joke, but jokes really don't need to be listed on Steam for sale. Legacy of the Pact doesn't look like anything. I guess I would say people should let me know in the comments if I'm being too cruel to any of these games. I think most people would agree with me or say that I'm not cruel enough as far as video games. I'm still mostly dismissing tower defense games and mostly dismissing horror games. But yeah, there is always that possibility that I've become too jaded around games, and that I should give some of these games more of a shot. There is also a possibility, I have to admit, that at least there's more to say about the adult games because I can't show everything that's being shown in the adult games. Like this game Vampire Tourist is a great example of just terrible screenshots. That the quality of the screenshots is not bad, but there's no interface, there's no people. It does seem like it is just a walking simulator where you happen to be a vampire, if I was to guess. You're a vampire, you like photography and long walks in the middle of the night. That seems to be the entire game. And then of course you have things like Sphere Game here, which these are just tech demos. Lucky to be a Landlord as a roguelike deck building game. Could I give a game like this a chance as a slot machine? Using a slot machine to earn real money and defeat capitalism, this game does not contain any real world currency gambling or microtransactions. Well then why did you say... Oh, it says to earn rent money. I misread that. So it's a slot machine game, maybe with some roguelike deck building actions around it. It's not the worst thought. I'll give it a chance. I am looking for a decent slot machine game, and a slot machine game built around improved roguelike or roguelite elements would be helpful. That way you get better at playing a slot machine instead of just wasting your life away at the same incredibly low odds. Polaroid, on the other hand, looks awful. Towering. looks awful. The grave house looks awful. Wow, they really... The Steam Direct system needs some other improvement to it, I think. Some kind of level of mob rule voting as to whether a game deserves to be on Steam, but effectively, if something gets on Steam and there's nobody that plays it and nobody reviews it, it doesn't get put on the front page or shown to people anyways. Here we have a Wolfenstein clone. Characters are too big in this one, plus the visuals are not good. I'm not sure I'd ever really want to play a Wolfenstein clone in the first place. Should that possibly be should there possibly be an argument around me making YouTube spotlights around Wolfenstein clones? That's an interesting thought. Yeah, I'm drinking some water now as I'm watching this trailer for Sex, Drugs, and Cyberpunk, which immediately in its trailer just jumped to straight up porn. You've got 3D models that look, frankly, really, really detailed and really good of CGI, mostly women. Yeah, I think it might be all women. Now, because they're cyberpunk, there's a girl with a lot of tattoos. There's little lines where it looks like they've modified their bodies. A lot of the 3D models, though, definitely do look like just regular humans, so they're not going very heavy into the cyberpunk element. There's a lot of adult toys being used and shown. There is just a lot being shown and promised. Now, I don't know from the screenshots what kind of gameplay mechanic it has. It doesn't seem like it might be much of anything, really. If anything, it might just be a straight sex simulator. But the graphics look great. The color palette in this case is in kind of a weird mixture because it's cyberpunk. You do have a lot of neon colors and things like that, but I would say with the CGI, 3D CGI models and the skin tones, it definitely seems like it's going for more of a realistic type of depiction and not really an anime type depiction. Although realistic is really the wrong word here. It's trying to look something like a like cyberpunk. What's interesting too is this is a VR only game. So you are in a weird situation here where you need VR to do it. It's priced fairly nicely at $17.99 for VR. It claims to have full audio in English, and I would suspect that is the case. Yeah. The drug aspect, where it's like pick a drug, I'm not sure if that really plays much of a role in the game. The description is incredibly short as far as what is about the game. What's funny about this game in particular is this is really just taking it a slight notch more extreme than Cyberpunk 2077 themselves was implying or trying to go at. It was just, there was a ton of sexual content in Cyberpunk 2077 that didn't really just retroactively was de-emphasized in reviews and in the actual main narrative. But there definitely was a thought that in Cyberpunk, where you're modifying your body doing drugs, having sex was not as big of a deal because it wouldn't physically hurt you, or your body autonomy is just not thought of the same way. That was certainly part of the bizarre elements that I felt about Cyberpunk Edge Runners, is that there was just a lot of people showing a lot of skin and just straight up being engaged in sexual activity in front of other people and not caring. Here's that game We Are the Caretakers out on Steam, which, yeah, this is already on my follow list, but I'll leave it. Here we have yet another adult game called The Wet Sand, which this is flat 2D characters, but more drawn in the Western style. It seems like it's going for very much a nautical pirate theme. The art style, I would say, of the characters is not as consistent as I would like. There are definitely some images. It feels like it's just a visual novel, and yet it's early access for $7.99. It's English and Russian too, so that is concerning a little bit as a red flag. But yeah, at a certain point, if there was just enough Russian games and they had their own art style, I might describe animation as a Russian art style. But if I were to say Russian art style, I can't help but think that most people would assume that it looks like some kind of Soviet era communist or propaganda art style, something like that. And that wouldn't be what I really meant, so that's probably not the right descriptor to use. But yeah, you can see that the drawings here are a little rough, whereas the drawings on the thumbnail are a little bit better. Let's see, next we have a game called Pedigree Tactics, which looks like garbage. We have a game called Cat Life, which doesn't look polished enough. I'd almost buy into this if there was more to it. You know what, I'll give this one a chance, but I won't make a YouTube short around it. Here we have a game called Kids Quest, which is possibly a better name for a game where you play as an animal, and this time you're playing as a fox. I'll give that one a chance. And Return to the Abyss. Is this an adult game? Like the risk is just so high. Bar and bartending functions is mature content. So it looks like it might be a top-down twin-stick shooter. It might be somewhat similar to the Zombie Survivors game that people are talking about right now. A lot of mess on the screen at the same time. Yeah, if you were to take the Zombie Survivors game and just throw some anime girl on it, you probably would catch a slightly different audience. $3.79 English and Chinese. Is there a relevancy there? I don't know. I guess I'll give this a chance though. And don't really have a ton of YouTube shorts to make, so I'll give that a YouTube short, even though it probably doesn't deserve it. Tribu. Doesn't look like there's quite enough game here. Exploration open world game. No, I'm gonna say no. Seven Wonders. Looks like it's an old game. I'll give it a follow to see if maybe this is based off of some old game. Good Pizza, Great Pizza Cooking Simulator. That's rated very positively. I'll give that a follow and think about it some more later. Generally, I don't like a cooking simulator game, but I'll give that a chance. And then we have yet another adult game here called BDSM Love, which every single screenshot is accurate to that description. Flat 2D, colorful anime style, although the characters are big-breasted and older looking compared to like schoolgirl outfits. It looks completely uncensored. The question here is, I guess, just going to come down to how many images are you getting. The images seem fairly consistent. There is perhaps a slight issue in this, in that I am seeing bondage, I'm seeing girls tied up. I am not seeing any interactions that would imply discipline or sadism or masochism per se, which those are all different things that just get all merged together as one thing. BDSM Love is $1.19, so there may not be much of a game here. It's a 2D puzzle game, but no numbers as far as how many pictures you get. So every single pixel in the screenshot may be the entirety of the game, so you may only get like 6 or 7 pictures, which that would be a small amount, certainly. And the generic name does warn me away a little bit, but for $1.19 it still looks like it's a decent deal. Also, they bothered to make a thumbnail that's censored around this game and a logo around the title, so it's not incredibly low effort. The pictures themselves look fine. Of course, these are also just the kind of pictures you would totally be able to get online for free, so I have no idea like the level of quality of that. It would be risky. Of course, you have that 2 hours no question asked refund policy. And then we have this game called Prepare Your Anus, Exploring Black Holes for Adults, and the art style here, this almost feels like it's one of those terrible Cartoon Network art styles. It's really off model and off depiction of the characters, or of something that would even look humanoid in the first place. It seems to me like it's just a visual novel as a game. Almost every screenshot shows some level of nudity. It definitely feels like it's trying to be a Leisure Suit Larry game if you didn't have the point and click aspects of Leisure Suit Larry and you were set on an alien planet. There is one African American looking lady in it, but there is also a white skinned lady, so exploring black holes for adults is not the only theme that they're focusing on. There's also a purple alien lady. It's selling for $7.19, and the languages it supports are English, Russian, and Chinese, so I suspect it's probably more of a joke game than anything. Here we have, once again, a significant amount of description as far as the adult content, so maybe Valve and Steam is asking for that more and more. It's not the worst looking game though, as far as, since there just really isn't any competition there. If you were going to tell me a funny story and just have a lot of adult content in it, I would be potentially willing to uh, willing to go down that journey. And, like, there was this Canadian show called Lex where it was heavily sexual and lewd, but could never really get that extreme on what it showed because it was actually airing on TV on the Sci-Fi Channel in America, in the United States, and some Canadian channel originally, I imagine. And so it was this kind of dumb teenage comedy, something like Porky's, which, yeah, these days something like Porky's would have a hard time being aired without somebody trying to cancel it, whereas an adult game like that would fly under the radar. And then our last game that came out on Steam over the past couple days is the Starving Tournament, which does not look like anything. Right. So we have our GameDeveloper.com articles, and I guess we are back to having 3-hour streams now at this point. The Games Done Quick founder Mike Yama has announced his departure. He founded Games Done Quick in 2010 and has operated the company as the company's owner for 13 years. There's been a lot of change as far as Games Done Quick. What it was originally, a group of gamers having fun, making dumb jokes, and speedrunning games, and what it is now, which has become much more commercial as a product, and as it's become more and more commercial as a product, they've let less and less dumb jokes, less and less raunchy, rough humor take place. On top of that, at this point I'm just going to start leaning back. This will be an experiment of how far can I lean back in my recliner and still be heard before I'm literally just losing breath in my lungs. Over the past 3 or 4 years, you've seen the implementation of everybody at Games Done Quick pointing out their pronouns. It's become much more woke than it probably should have become. It's actually a great, ridiculous example of the fact that 99% of everybody is using just the default she, he pronouns, she, her, whatever, for girls, and he, him for boys, and yet that every single person has their pronouns listed on the screen. They don't come out overtly and say too much otherwise. GDC has not supported major organizations, to my knowledge, that are super focused on woke things or even LGBTQ plus things. They've mostly been donating money to Doctors Without Borders, which works pretty well for them. But yeah, doing anything for 13 years is a long time. And GDC, for what it is, a single source of really learning how to figure out how to make speedruns interesting by having questions and commentators talk, whereas most of the other speedruns you'll find online just has somebody playing the game and listening to music and not talking. The speedruns that GDC show are not the best speedruns out there, obviously, but they are interesting to watch, speedruns and educational speedruns, and they do get a lot of people to look at games that otherwise you would have never played or never even known about. GDC in general has also kind of run out of games to speedrun. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel most of the time now, or they're just doing randomizers on games or playing the same games for the 4th or 5th time. this very well may not change too much, and this may have nothing to do with Games Done Quick becoming fairly woke, though he may very well just be tired. The quote here, though, is, I'm not sure where I'll go next, but one thing I'm sure about is that I will take a break and a vacation before diving headfirst into my next adventure. That does not sound like somebody who has planned out his departure in any way, and that does imply that he is being forced out, in my opinion. Because if you were going to take a vacation and adventure, why not announce that you're going on a sabbatical or taking a vacation first, and do that while still getting paid by the organization, and then announce that you're not coming back from the sabbatical. I'm not deep within Games Done Quick, so I have no idea if Yuyama is particularly the character that people like or don't like, and I have no idea if the Matt Merkel person who's replacing him is a character people like or don't like. It'll be interesting to see if Games Done Quick changes much. Games Done Quick and speedrunning really should play more of a role amongst gamers, but the vast majority of gamers don't really watch Games Done Quick or speedruns and just play the games they want to play. It is inherently wasting your own personal time to play video games if you're watching somebody else play video games. That gets very much in line with watching people play video games on Twitch or YouTube instead of just playing the games that you want to play, which I am shooting myself in the foot by saying that, but it is true. I would hope that most of my fans that do want to play video games are playing the video games they want to play instead of watching me, but also I'd like people to watch me. My hope as a video game critic is to give consumer advice so people would watch me play a game and then decide that they want to play the game themselves and probably do it better than I did it. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has an article that says that a new FTC proposal aims to ban non-compete clauses for all U.S. workers. This would be incredibly good if they can get that passed. We'll see if the rich oligarchs that have so much influence over the United States government allow that to happen or not. Although right now, while it's not video game related, there is a debacle happening in Congress in which they are failing to vote in a Speaker of the House, so no laws and no government can really be passed. No new laws could be passed until that happens. But that doesn't mean that the United States President can't issue a bunch of executive orders and that existing laws might not empower the FTC to ban non-compete clauses. Yeah. There's nothing in capitalism that really says non-compete clauses should be allowed at all. If companies claim a legal right to sell products to everybody and buyers claim the legal right to buy from anybody, then workers should have a similar legal right to work for anybody and not potentially work at one job that's awful and be unable to quit that job and get a different job that's similar at a better company. One of the things that has come out that I saw on YouTube, and so I'm taking this as fact, is apparently the new California law has listed the pay rates of California companies, and Activision Blizzard employees were getting paid half the amount compared to comparable companies in California. So not only were they being treated incredibly bad, they were also getting incredibly underpaid. Now, it is a little unfair for GameDeveloper.com to use a picture here of Activision when this story does not have anything whatsoever to do with Activision Blizzard. this obviously is yellow journalism, when really you should have put a picture of the FTC building or the United States or the American flag, or just not had a picture in the first place. Like, at no point in this story is Activision Blizzard mentioned at all, even though they would be affected by that. That's straight up just propaganda, yellow journalism. Moving on, thanks to K-pop, Goose Goose Duck enters 2023 with 560,000 Steam players. I don't know what they mean by K-pop there. A free-to-play multiplayer game. It's on par with Among Us in terms of rapid player base. The success, according to analyst Daniel Ahmed, can be owed to its popularity in China and Korea. It probably doesn't hurt that Kim Tae-hyung, member of the extremely popular K-pop group BTS, recently streamed himself playing it. Okay. I guess that's a bit of a stretch. Yeah, I'd say that's a bit of a stretch to say a BTS member streamed himself playing this, and that's why this game has a massive fandom. But whatever. I've never heard of this game, and I bet we're not talking about this game in a week. Or if we are talking about it in a week, whatever. It may just be the new fad game. Dwarf Fortress sold close to 500,000 copies in December. That's a lot of copies, certainly for a game that definitely does not look particularly that interesting. I have heard a lot of people talk about Dwarf Fortress, but just looking at that, I'm immediately uninterested in it. Apparently Microsoft and Activision no longer think that FTC is unconstitutional. Microsoft previously claimed the FTC, which is attempting to block the purchase of Activision Blizzard, violated the US Constitution. I'm sure this is just lawyers throwing spaghetti at the wall, or just making bad filings. Which, yeah, this is just quote mining, really. Quote mining or legal filing mining, where you, in legal filing, have to list every single possible argument or cause anyway, so you would make ridiculous things you don't really believe and you don't think that you would ever succeed on. But it's not really worth it or genuine to report on it. If Microsoft actually did succeed in proving that the FTC is unconstitutional in general, that would really throw the entire United States into chaos, and almost certainly nobody would allow that to pass. Not the Supreme Court and not any of the lower courts. Courts are going to be highly unlikely to remove governmental power once it's been established and well defined. Case precedent also does work in a lot of cases, so every single time the FTC has been shown in a winning of any court case to have authority and not be unconstitutional, then you would have that precedent that says, well, in this case, if they were really unconstitutional, they would have not won. We already talked about Skybox Labs being acquired by NetEase. We've already talked about Deathverse Let It Die being redeveloped after the service ends in July, although they're advertising it differently. The actual tweet here does say they're suspending its service as of 7/18th. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to all of our players for their support. And then now they've come back and said that they are going to redevelop it and try again, which I wish more games would try a second time on their launches and releases instead of just abandoning it and moving on to something else. Even that game Babylon's Fall potentially could have had more polish put to it and a re-release, and might have been better. Death vs. Let It Die in particular is a very unique looking game and has a higher chance of catching people's attention the second time. Let's see. Vampire Survivors developer has credited clones for a surprise mobile release. When there's a hit game, there's sure to be plenty of clones to follow. So, to combat or get there first, they're releasing Vampire Survivors on iOS and Android during the Game Awards in December. Yeah, and that might be the only thing that's good about game clones in competition, is that it may push more and more game developers to make mobile versions of their games if they can. Most games are not really that easy to make mobile versions of it. 2048 really messed up on that case. Here we're at the fall list of games. Like, this game, Believe, has not that many reviews, but of the English ones that are here, they're positive. So I'd have to make a special exception and just put this on the wish list. This isn't a VR game. Yeah, I'll make a special exception and wish list that. Yeah. We do definitely need more mobile games that are better quality, so if Vampire Survivors is the first of a series of games that are very popular that release mobile versions just to try and get more sales and beat out competition, that's not a bad idea. There is a new, I think, Snapdragon CPU processor they just announced that potentially will be even better at doing graphics and playing video games. We still probably are 3 or 4 generations away from major improvements in which mobile gaming really makes sense. This game, being Ball, only has one review from a year ago, so that's gotta go. Behind Closed Doors, A Developer's Tale. Has no reviews from a year ago, so I'm gonna say no to that. Before we leave, there's a city building game with a hex grid concept. It's rated very positively, so I'll put that on the wish list. It's probably not quite my style of game that I really would want to play, but if somebody gifted it to me, I would look at it. Before the Last Hour, it's a card-based simulator. I'm going to give this one more time. It does look like it's probably going to make it to the wish list, though. It's also in early access still. Beers and Boomerangs is a VR game. Why wouldn't this be Beers, Barbies, and Boomerangs if you're going to have barbecues on it too? Definitely an Australian themed game. Yeah, well, there might be something there. I'll give it more time, or leave it because it's a VR game. Bow and Bow needs more time as a Game Boy looking game. Mostly I've said no to pretty much every Game Boy looking game. And yeah, at this point I am just done with Kirby and the Forgotten Kingdom. I haven't gone back to it in a week, and I don't really see a reason why I would go back to it. It would make more sense for me to start playing Metroid Prime, but I'm going to finish No More Heroes first, at the very least. And I need to schedule videos and be certain that I have everything scheduled properly. This is a rhythm-based Tetris game, which I think effectively eliminates me from playing this, because A, I don't have rhythm, and B, I definitely don't want to really play just a generic Tetris game. So this might be something Beatrice might be something interesting to other people, but in my case I'm going to say no. Then you have this kind of highly colorful character that does not seem like they show up in the game at any point. They may be only in the thumbnail. Whack the moles, beat the moles. Is this a VR game? No. This is from 2020, and I'm leaving this on the fall list. Not because I'd actually buy it, but because I'm just looking for something that would be a whack-the-mole game that would be better. There probably is a game that has this as a mini game already. I know some of the Sam & Max games have something like this, but you would have a hard time remembering which Sam & Max game to load up if you wanted to play this minigame. Arguably, this is also a minigame that isn't just that fun, particularly if it's not in VR. So, I probably should just remove it from the fall list for those reasons. I just convinced myself to remove it. Let's see, Beat Souls is a rhythm game with some colorful anime characters. It is a rhythm game, obviously. But it is mixed reviewed, which is a shame because it looks like somebody put a lot of effort into this. This is being published and developed by Zoo Corporation, which is the game that has the Mahjong games mostly that have Pretty Girls Mahjong and similar games like that. Yeah, Pretty Girls 2048 Strike. It's the same anime games, anime girls out over and over again from Zoo Corporation. But yeah, when they actually try to make something that is more action based, it obviously didn't succeed. So that has to go. Beat Slug Super Highway I'll give some more time to, although maybe I shouldn't bother to give it more time. Right, and so that is the fall list. Let me bring up the Duel Live, even if I don't need to actually show the Duel Live for a daily quest at the moment. And then let me just look at my Twitter feed to see if there's any new news, and then we'll be done for the weekend at 3 hours and 22 minutes. Yep. So yeah, we're back to longer streams, which I knew that was going to probably become the case. Let's see. Actor Earl Bowen has passed away at 81 years old. I don't know why he would be mentioned by GameDeveloper.com. A lot of people are dying, certainly. Somebody named Infinite has gotten 20 million subscribers on YouTube. I have no idea who Infinite is. Let's see. There's not likely to be a lot of new news on the Friday. The print edition of a magazine called Wireframe is stopping. They're going all digital, which, okay, I don't know anything about, really don't know anything about Wireframe as a magazine. There definitely is more tweets now than there have been in the past week. I wouldn't be surprised if people swore off YouTube, swore off Twitter for just a couple. They swore it off for life, but could only actually stop using it for a couple of weeks, and now they're back. It is worth pointing out, yeah, it seems like it's been at least a full week since Elon Musk has tweeted anything or done anything stupid. So yeah, secretly in the background he could be ruining the company, but in the actual foreground, in the actual service, it seems to be fairly well back to normal. The ESA has an article here linking to a CNET article. Teaching your kids through games, you're going to have a higher engagement than if you were just lecturing. Parents are using video games to teach their kids crucial money skills. See the new ways parents are teaching their children life skills. So, yeah. And that's absolutely the last thing any parent wants to really hear, is that, oh, you're through video games you're teaching kids about money. Although kids really should be taught about money management, they definitely don't have the decision making abilities at the beginning to be good at money management. They're still giving out Tiny Tina shift codes, by the way, also, if you are following Twitter for that reason. But yeah, kids won't learn the money management skills if they're never given the opportunity to engage with it and potentially fail with it. So yeah, they have to be allowed to make mistakes, and in a virtual economy with virtual currency, that is the best place where they could make mistakes. Part of the problem, certainly, there is a lot of parents by default just go into absolute helicopter mode, absolute control mode, absolute domineering mode with their kids, and one way they go about that is to make sure their kids never touch any money or have access to any money until they're 16 or 17 years old, and then they say, all right, go get a job. There are definitely parents out there that tell their kids to go get jobs, and then they take their entire paychecks from them. And that leads to a lot of people just having poor money management skills and straight up having to be in such a desperate situation that they're having to rob people, shoplift things. I definitely think it's better to generally have chores for kids and tell them that their efforts will be rewarded with some amount of payment for those chores. And then they can waste that payment that they earned on mostly anything at that point. I definitely think that's the better way to do things. A lot of parents in general have this broke mentality in which, yes, they're not getting paid enough, but because they're not getting paid enough, they never spend a dime, and they're living like they are in a Depression era time during the Dust Bowl or something, and they catastrophize and make far too big of a deal when even a dollar is spent, making it far too negative an experience to actually exchange money for value or goods with value. And that broke mentality leads to a lot of unhappy people, to say the least. And yeah, I definitely have seen a lot of broke mentality where people literally wouldn't have wanted to spend a single dollar over the course of several decades. It's just like, no, the answer to any question should be is always just no. I don't want to spend money ever. Uh, they apparently want to be buried with it, or they just don't have it. And a big part of that broke mentality certainly is that they don't want to seek out better places to live that would pay higher, or better jobs that would pay higher in the place that they do live. They want to be comfortable in that broke mentality and doing nothing new and changing nothing, and that's not good for kids. Kids want to do new things, and they want to try out new things. They want to try out everything. That's just a natural state of a human being until you fall into this economical depression mentality that a lot of people have, which is just like, don't try anything new, don't change anything, don't do anything at all. It leads to a lot of kids growing up hearing the word no a million times more often than they hear the word yes. And if you're saying no at such a significantly higher ratio to yes, you're probably not being that helpful to your kids as far as them trying out new things and learning new things. Anyways, I don't want to go into too big of a rant there. So here's the two articles that probably are worth mentioning. There's this obituary for Earl Bowen, passing away at 81 years old, I assume of probably natural causes, and old age in general. He was a character actor for TV and film, but he did voice work for World of Warcraft and Metal Gear Solid 2. So a rough connection here. I don't particularly recognize this guy. He was in the Terminator film franchise. He was in Alien Nation. That's a very old movie. And Seinfeld. That's a very old movie. So he was pretty old to begin with. He voiced LeChuck in the Monkey Island franchise. So I guess there's a big credit there. He was in Psychonauts, Raven Software's X-Men Legends, and Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty. He is Hikima the Wise in Hearthstone's Heroes of Warcraft. He's in various World of Warcraft expansions. So yeah, he had a couple things. And then Focus Entertainment has added an ex-Bethesda developer, Sean Brennan, as CEO. According to Focus, bringing Brennan as CEO will help the company grow and achieve its own dreams of being a more high-profile publisher. So yeah, Focus Entertainment, I guess, is no longer called Focus Home Entertainment. I feel like Focus Home Entertainment as a company has been around for a long time. But yeah, they definitely are looking towards still being a publisher, and Bethesda being acquired recently, relatively recently. It was acquired by Microsoft. I wouldn't be surprised if we see several people leave Bethesda. In this case, it seems like he's moving to a French publisher, so I'd assume he was in France to begin with. Alright, well, that Duel Live, I guess I didn't even need to do. So, I didn't even get a reward for doing that. That's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want to friend or follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.